So welcome everybody to how to build your legal team brand with webinars. And today you're going to learn why delivering on-brand, info-packed webinars will build trust in your legal function. So I'm Sian Wingate, and I'm a legal operations coach and manager, as well as an in-house lawyer. And these are a sample of the organisations that I work with currently or have worked with in the past, including the lovely Islands. And I help busy legal in-house teams to free up their time to work on what matters most to them. And it's something I am deeply passionate about, having worked in in-house legal services for well over a decade. So today's focus is on how you can build your legal team's brand with webinars. There's a number of ways you can build your legal team's brand, but we're just going to focus today on this structure of a webinar. It might be a live webinar. It might be a recorded webinar. You might not even call it a webinar. You might just be having an information sharing session via Teams. You might use Zoom in your organization and be running a training session via Zoom. Whatever you want to call it, this is just going to be talking you through how to create that framework to deliver that type of information sharing, but also to build your brand for your legal team as you do it. So 3 common issues that I and sort of my in-house colleagues have come across in the past decade or so working in-house is when I've either done work myself or during the time that I worked with Islands, either on the committee or during my time in the president role, I became quite aware that we all had very similar issues that we experienced in our roles in-house. It might be an issue that people didn't know what we actually did or what legal services that we actually had on offer to our organizations. So the what is often a problem. And it's often difficult if you have a full function in-house team to be able to convey with any kind of clarity what it is you actually do. And it's equally as difficult for your colleagues sometimes to understand what you do because they might put us on a pedestal. They might think we do something magical or mysterious, or they're just downright intimidated and they just don't know how to ask. So the what is often a big challenge point. The second challenge or issue that I've often encountered is a tech issue. Now, this might be because you're in one of those great legal teams that started to get really on board with tech, and you want to find a way to sort of roll out an adoption of a new technology product or service. And suddenly you find yourself in this train the trainer role. You went from happily doing your legal work behind closed doors, behind your desk, behind your email, and then suddenly somebody comes along, they've helped you to implement a new technology system. Maybe it's a matter management system, maybe it's a contract management system, maybe it's a compliance system, and all of a sudden, the responsibility sits on your shoulders and the legal team to become these amazing trainers. And you've got to get all these people in your organization to adopt this new technology. You might be one of the few that have the benefit of having a change manager or having somebody in, say, a business enablement team, but sometimes you just don't. Sometimes it's down to you. And so there's often a challenge where you now need to start to learn how to roll out technology adoption and training, and webinars are a way to do that. And another kind of key or frequent common issue is who. This might seem strange, but sometimes people want to know who you are, and you find it difficult to convey to your colleagues who you are as a person as opposed to who you are as a function. And you might want to start to find ways to build engagement with you as a person or an individual. You might be sole counsel. You might be one of a very small team. You might be one of a really big legal team that actually gets a little bit lost in the numbers. And so you might have issues about helping your colleagues in the wider organization understand A, who you are, and B, kind of who you are in terms of the way that you can help them. And you might want to do that because you might want them to feel less intimidated, or you might want them just simply to know who to contact for certain key legal issues. So 3 things we're going to learn today on this webinar is you're going to learn why your legal brand matters, your legal team's brand matters. We're going to talk about that first. Second, you're going to learn how to run a webinar like this one in 45 minutes to an hour. And later on, I'll give you some hints and tips about how to even condense that down to much shorter sessions, which often helps with some of those, especially technology adoption rollouts. And then thirdly, we're going to help you to access some insights into the types of topics you can use webinars to expand onto your organization or to develop information on. So 3 things: why your legal team brand matters, how to run a webinar in 45 minutes or an hour seamlessly, and how to access insights into the types of topics to run webinars on. Is everybody excited to learn about these things? Pop yes in the chat if you are. Okay, so it's question time. So I would like you guys to pop into the Q&A if you think that your legal team right now has a brand. Do you think your legal team right now has a brand? So Simon says no, he doesn't think he's got a brand. Dave's saying yes, excellent. Lisa's saying, well, I used to, but maybe not anymore. We've got someone else saying no. All very common themes. Yes, no, maybe, possibly. Well, let's just dive a little bit deeper into that particular question. So let's first of all look at what is a brand and what is branding. I've just seen another one. Yes, I'm a work in progress. Excellent. This will help you even more today. So branding is the process of creating a strong, positive perception of your team or company and its related products or services in your colleague's mind or your client's minds. So let's just focus on a few of the words in that particular paragraph. Positive perception about your team, about your services that's in your colleagues' minds. So keep that really in your brain while we look through the next few slides, because this really underpins what we're going to try to achieve with this particular part of the webinar, but also with using your webinars as a tool to help you build that brand. So let's start off with some examples of some branding. And these are from organizations I've worked with in the past or are currently working with. So here we've got some samples of the Queenstown Lakes District Council branding, as it were. Now, I'm running the corporate legal function there at the moment, and as well as being the legal operations manager. And as you can see, we have built up a really consistent theme using a consistent color palette, a consistent tone or style, and a consistent layout of our documentation kit. We've got things like the dark blue, that's for legal documents. We've got the light blue for guidelines. We've got language that talks about how people can learn with the legal team, how to do certain things. We've got contract documentation that is in a format that is fill in the blanks, nice drop-down boxes, pick it up and fill it in. You've got that sorted. And as you can see from the area at the top of the slide, it's a very small team, which many of you might be. Pop in the chat or in the Q&A how big your legal team is. I'd love to know. This particular team is one team comprised of 4 lawyers, and they service 7 directorates with 28 functions across 30 different service lines. It's a lot of work to do, a lot of work. Oh, we've got some teams of 1, we've got some teams of 14. My word, we've got a team of 65. You must be from Auckland Council. I don't know anyone else who's that big, or maybe you're from the Treasury. So we've got lots of varying shapes and sizes, a team of 3. This will apply to you regardless of the size that you are. But my point here is we've got a certain kind of brand standard across the way that we are sharing our resources and our information. Let's have a look at another example. This is from when I worked with Tuatahi First Fibre, which is a telecommunications team. That's a fibre broadband company. When I worked with them, they were called ultra-fast fibre. And again, you can see a very consistent style and tone. We've got documents like standards that we released, which had a certain feel and flavour to them. We had contract documentation, which again was fill in the blanks, consistent theme here. We had a SharePoint site, which allowed people to access videos about how to design or how to do things. We had webinar training that we recorded and released. We had legal knowledge banks where people could access resources, and so on it goes. So as you can see, this is a consistent approach to the brand style. But I want you to have a think about whether that is the only thing that branding is about. Is brand just about materials though? What do you think? Pop your answers in the Q&A. Is brand just about materials? Thinking about brand being the perception of you and your team, and the services you offer in somebody's mind. And if it's not materials, what might branding be about? Exactly. It's about the people. It's what they associate you with. That's one of our answers. Someone else, Karina, said, nope, it's the people. Exactly. It's about you, precisely. Natalie saying, look, it's about your approach and the way that you tackle work. 100%. Peter saying, no, look, it's more than materials. It's about personality. It's about behavior. Absolutely spot on. And I did expect nothing less because we've got a wonderful kind of seminar full of lawyers who are super duper clever. You're absolutely right. Brand is not just about materials. They are super important. Of course they are. It's great to have a consistent look, a consistent style, and that generates a lot of trust in you as an organization or a department in an organization. But it's about more than that. You're absolutely right that branding is about the perception that others have about you. And this is created by your behavior towards your colleagues and others, as well as your tone. And I'm going to give you an example because it's always great to have a visual here. And I just want to check here, another tech check. Can people see the slides? Can they see this one that says branding is feelings? Just pop yes in the chat, or Bree, just tell me if you can see it. Okay, thank you for that. Okay, so if branding is feelings, how are we going to create those feelings? Imagine that people don't even know who you are. They've never even met you in person. And that's really live for a lot of us at the moment. Of course it is, because we do a lot of our work remotely. So if you want to create that feeling, then let's have a look at some examples of how you can encourage people to perceive you as being that kind, inviting, helpful, affable, approachable team that you are, or that you aspire to be, or that you aspire others to know that you are. You might use language like ask us. Now, this is an example from the legal request system that we've got set up at Queenstown Lakes District Council. We haven't got it just saying, click here or here's resource. We actually invite people and we say, ask us, ask legal. We're inviting people in. In the language that we use to create the invites for the webinars, we use language like, hey, if you and your team create hard copy or online forms, this training's for you. Grab a cuppa. We use language that shows that we're just like them. Do you need a cuppa? We do. Makes them feel like they're going to have a fireside chat with their very helpful legal team. They're not going to be told what to do or scolded, for example. We might use language in our invites like, do you need to create something? Do you need to do something? So what we're doing is showing your colleagues that you have already thought about what their needs are, rather than about what your needs are. Now, as lawyers, one of our key roles, of course, is to manage legal risk. It's to encourage compliance, and it's to be able to demonstrate how to do that. It might be very easy or a reliable technique to simply tell people what needs to be done. But when you have to sort of flip that on its head and think about how they need to learn, then it shows that you are demonstrating to those colleagues that you are willing to think about how they need your help, rather than you just imposing that help on them. So this language is emotive, and it's deliberately emotive to convey these feelings and these perceptions of your behavior as being inviting, as being sharing, as being collaborative, and as being sort of discovery. You want to discover what they need. And that kind of carries on if you look at the other example here, which is, have you ever wondered what we actually do when we review your contract, and what part do you need to play? This is an example of a webinar we did at Ultrafast Fibre. Again, it's inviting your colleagues to think, well, we think you might have wondered this, have you? And it means that they think you already understand what their problems are or what their challenges are. So it is not just about materials, it's absolutely 100% about the feeling. And it's not necessarily about your feeling, it's really about the feeling you're creating in the minds of your colleagues or your clients, whatever you might call them. Okay. Before we jump into the next learning point, has anyone got any thoughts they want to share about how to create a great brand feeling for your colleagues or clients? Pop it in the Q&A, and I'd love to hear more about what you guys might be doing. The question is, what are you doing to help your colleagues feel invited or to build your brand? Interesting. We've got no takers here. That's okay. You'll have loads of ideas before we get to the end of this session. So let's dive in to learning point number 2. We've learned about what a legal team brand is, or what branding is generally. So what we're going to move into now is the how, the nuts and bolts, and the practical, actionable takeaway tips. Now, if you haven't already done so, then do download the Excel or Google Sheet. I've put it in there as a Google Sheet, but it's easy to just download it as an Excel worksheet. If you haven't got the ability to look at that on the screen right now, don't worry, we will work through it together. Okay. So what we're going to learn now is how to run a webinar in 45 minutes to 1 hour seamlessly. No problem. Easy peasy. So Michaela's asking, where is the sheet? So Michaela, if you go into the top of the sheet, there should be a link. I'm just going to pop it in again. So if you guys can see, Bree, can you just make sure that if possible, you can pop that in to the Q&A as a permanent link? Oh, that's fine, Michaela. You've got it now. Great. Okay, let's dive in. So this is what you'll have as the download resource. And we're going to dive into how we use this framework to create a webinar, just like the one I'm running with you today. It's a 1 hour webinar framework, and it's really easy to adapt to reduce the time. Not everybody has the ability to run a single whole hour, and sometimes it's not appropriate for the types of topics you want to train people on. And we'll talk about that in learning point 3. So this sheet is my framework that I use to design a 45 to 60-minute webinar where I share, where I want to share some learning outcomes with my colleagues or my clients, as it were. And so it's structured to have a certain number of slides. And that's really important because it just cuts down all the thinking time. You're not sitting there wondering how the hell you're going to create this PowerPoint, and you get that anxiety, and then you start to get really obsessed with pictures and photos and uploads. And if you're anything like me, you get really stuck in the design and just actually start to really enjoy that way more than your day job. So this is going to keep you on point and keep you efficient and let you just design it. So what you'd use this framework for is to design webinars that are consistent, and that's in terms of their delivery method, but also consistently on brand for your legal function. So if you've got your nice PowerPoint that's got all the colors of your organization, you might have even had your own logo designed for your legal office. You might have had a PowerPoint designed where you've had some reference to the legal team, maybe a logo on there or some icons. Whatever it is, you want to be using that same kind of slide deck each and every time. That really helps to build that brand consistency, but it also has a psychological effect, which a marketing person shared with me one time. And they said, actually, when it looks and feels the same, people get really encouraged. They feel really reassured because it shows that you know what you're doing. So it's interesting where the psychology comes into this. It's going to allow you to create webinars that fit into a very specific delivery time frame. Time is so precious for all of us. We are awash with meetings. Often we have very little opportunity to share what we need to share with our colleagues or our organizations. So you have to really respect people's time. So it is essential that you've got a method to be able to deliver within that time frame. And the other issue is that you've all been to seminars, I'm sure you have, with many different types of personalities. You've got technical sessions or seminars you've been to, maybe with private law firms that are giving sort of technical law updates. You might have been to something which is more of a pitch, which is maybe more of a marketing. You might have gone to just like an update session, which is just sharing information. But we've all experienced that same thing, which is people run over time and then they rush at the end, or they run over time because they've allowed questions and answers to just interrupt the flow and they've kind of gone off on a tangent and you feel irritated. You're like, I've got stuff to do. I budgeted an hour for this, and even that hour was too precious to budget, and I'm probably going to watch half and the rest of it I'm going to watch on the recording, which I'll never do. With that in mind, wouldn't it be wonderful if you could create a webinar that is always on time, that always does what it says and gets people to the end and they've got something to take away, which is, yes, that all worked. That will build that perception of you as being organized, thinking about your colleagues, thinking about their time, and valuing that that is important to them as well as you. The other thing this framework will do is help to build authority. Now, part of branding is, yes, it's about materials. Yes, it's about creating that perception. But for your legal team brand, you already have a huge advantage over almost every other department, save perhaps for finance, which is people already respect you. They respect you as an authority in what you do because you're a lawyer. We're very privileged to have that respect. We are a profession where people often assume we know more than we do. I don't know about you, but I've been into many meetings with colleagues and they honestly think I know exactly what they do. And I'm like, just the lawyer. I don't know about your engineering work at all. Or they respect that you will have the answer to their problem, or they will definitely respect and value that you'll probably know how to get to that solution to whatever their problem might be. So you're already winning. You're on a winning streak already. It's a bit like being the best man at a wedding. People want their speech to be great, and so they'll laugh even if the joke was a bit thin. So think of yourselves like that. But what you want to be doing is building that authority and amplifying that authority to show people, yes, I do know my stuff. I do know how to run a compliant risk register. I do know how to review that MSA. I do know how to implement that SaaS technology contract. I do understand how to submit those pleadings to the High Court for that appeal. Yes, I do know how to file that regulatory information disclosure with the Commerce Commission. Whatever it might be, your technical skills are not a question, but you can amplify your authority with a webinar or a training session to show people maybe the nuts and bolts of how you do it or how they can help you do that better. So it really builds on your authority. This framework will also include a feature where you can invite a guest. I don't want you to be afraid of that. I've hosted many webinars where I co-host, and I might invite somebody from within the organization to help me to deliver it. An example might have been, I did one for a marketing standard that we released, and I got the communications manager to come along and she talked to some of those learning points as well. I've done a session with another lawyer and we talked about how to do how to introduce milestones into contracts. And we talked about an active project he was working on where we had a milestone regime. So don't be afraid to invite other people. It actually sometimes takes the pressure off you, but also it allows people to hear more, and it also allows people to see more people within your team. So those people on the line who said they've got like a team of 75, somebody said they've got a team of 14. Imagine how great it would be if your colleagues got to see more than one of you on the other end of the screen. And then to reduce this webinar time frame, all you simply do is reduce the learning points. And I'll show you what I mean by that in a moment. Okay, so what does the framework look like? We're at 12:30. We've got about 25 minutes left of this particular webinar. And this is where we're going to get really into the detail. So first of all, you have a holding slide. You remember the holding slide that we had, or I had at the beginning. It was my first slide, which told you the title of the webinar, had a nice image of me so you knew who was going to host, and it had a snippet or an extract of the learning outcomes you were going to get. And it also showed you either the brand. So for me, it was my logo. For you, it might be your team or your organizational logo. So nice and straightforward. Don't forget it. A lot of people do, or they just put a title slide in. It's called a holding slide because it's got more than just the title in there. What you'll be able to do when you have finished this session is you'll be able to look at this framework plus the slide deck that you'll really receive, at the end of this session, and you'll be able to put the two together like a jigsaw and see how they all slot in. Because I actually use this framework to design this webinar. I've got exactly one of these filled in on my screen at the moment. Okay, then you have a welcome slide. And the welcome slide is letting people know who you are and what you do. And I want you to think of this almost like an elevator pitch. Although you work in the legal function, people still want to actually know how you can help them. You are a support service typically, certainly everywhere that I've worked, whether it's local government, whether it's commercial, whether it's non-for-profit, we typically in the legal team have been a support service to the entire organization. And so people sort of don't often think they need to work with you. Maybe they do, but they just don't know it yet. Or they want to work with you and they're just not sure how you actually help. So this is a great way to introduce that. You can say, hi, I'm Sian from Queenstown Lakes District Council. In our legal office, we help our council officers to manage risk and be compliant with their legal, statutory and regulatory obligations. Now that might be a bit of a mouthful. You might want to make it a little bit softer. Entirely up to you what tone you want to use. And you might say to people, thank you. That's really important to thank people for taking time out of their day. You want to thank them and use nice, soft, emotional language. I'm delighted you've taken some time out of your busy day to grab a cuppa and join me. And yes, I thought this might cause a question in the question box. Teresa's saying, hey, I am fascinated by the 9:15 or 11 a.m. on a Tuesday or a Thursday best info. Best time to share the info. Do you know what? This is from absolute trial and error. And you might all wonder why this is important. Okay, everyone knows that Monday to Friday is typically the working week. We also know that working week has been kind of flipped on its head a little bit with people doing flexible working. Some people, of course, already are part-time, or some people are being more flexible in terms of when they're in the office. Also, there are certain days in the week that people just don't want to be bothered. They've got stuff to do and they are not going to give you their attention or their focus. That often is a Monday. People are ready to start their week. They're planning out their week. They're triaging what work they've got. They've got missed deadlines from the previous week. Mondays are not a great day. People have team meetings. They have their catch-ups. It's just not a great day to inject yourself or insert yourself into their calendar. They don't want you there. They really don't. They might say they do, and then they just don't turn up. Or they drift, because you can see on Teams, if you're running these sessions through Teams, you can see people drop off. And I've done the stats. You can pull data. I've analyzed all the data, and I've seen that certain times when I would run these sessions, people would just drop off. I'd be like, okay, why? The other reason that a Tuesday and a Thursday is good is that Wednesday sometimes is, people call it hump day. It's often when people kind of stack things in their week and they might use it as like a doing day. And so typically, again, I've found that Wednesday often doesn't really work. People are doing site visits, they're out and about, they've really kind of jam-packed meetings in, and so they just don't want to come to yours. Friday is just a no-brainer. Who wants to learn anything on a Friday? Or people are off on a Friday. A lot of your colleagues are off if they do a 4-day working week or have a flexible working week, or they've got that panic because they haven't got all their stuff done, and so they try and do it all on Friday. They ain't going to come to your session. So Tuesday works well, Thursday works well, 9:15 is great. They've had a chance to get in, log on, grab their coffee. They haven't opened their email yet. They haven't gotten into the deep dive of work. They'll give you maybe 15 to 20 minutes. 9:15 is great if you're doing a short 15-minute session, or even a slightly longer 30-minute session. If you want them to actually stay with you for an hour, 11 a.m. works really well because they've had their coffee, they've started some work, they've got a couple of hours under their belt, they've had their morning tea, they're cruising into lunchtime, or they can go and do other things at lunchtime. You're not taking up the whole of their day. They can do things before and they can do things after. Just my experience. Do with that what you will, but that definitely has always worked for me. Okay, so that's your welcome slide. So you want to plan and time the rest of the session. So we've already dealt with the holding and the welcome. If you've got a guest, you want to introduce people to who your guest is. Don't forget them and don't expect them to introduce themselves. They will get often just, they sort of fade into the background if you're the one that's facilitating the session, and they'll expect you to introduce them. They need that verbal prompt. So you might then say, Teresa here is from our IP team, and she is going to help us understand more about trademarks. It might be Joanna is our communications manager, and she will help us to understand how to lodge a request to create a new online form. Nice and simple. Then you want to reiterate the topic title. And this is really important for two reasons. One, it gets your focus back to what you want to talk about. Number two, there's always latecomers. Always. It's just life. I am a chronic 5-minute later. I just don't get to places. I get to this on time because I have to, but typically I just sort of swan into sessions 2 to 3 minutes late. I just assume that's normal. And then I've got some people that are, you know, punctual princesses, and they just always on time, and I feel really bad. So it's really helpful just to accept that those people like me exist, and I feel like we might exist more often than the punctual people. And so you just reiterate the title, just remind people why they're there, and they're like, phew, okay, this is what we're here for. Then what you want to do is walk people through who the session is for. And this might seem like it's obvious, but it's not. You've got to remember your colleagues don't necessarily know why you want to share this information with them. And we can do a little bit of pre-work on that in the invitation. And you give them an extract and you give them a teaser about what they're going to learn and who would benefit from attending the session. But not everybody reads all those invitations. Some people just click accept. And so you haven't had that opportunity to showcase to them why they might find some value in what you want to share. So it is very helpful to explain who that might be. So an example there might be, this session is for you if you are responsible for creating online or hard copy forms or applications, and you need help with understanding how to be compliant with Privacy Act obligations. It might be, this session is for you if you've ever wondered what legal requests you can submit with our team, and you need help understanding how to do that. It might be, this session is for you if you've missed our in-person training session on this new X technology, and you want to recap on how to use it. So you can see there's lots of ways that you can showcase who it's for. It's really helpful, again, builds up that brand that you care about them and you've thought about what, why the session is important to them. So next we move into the source of the learning need. Now, you don't run sessions for no reason. You know, you guys will have got 103 people on this webinar today, which is wonderful. you guys are busy. There's one thing that we can all probably say that we all have in common is typically we've got more work than we can cope with. So why would you take time out of that busyness or that full utilization and start to run training sessions? It's not for the good of your health. It's not because you love being on screen, though some people do. I do. I'd do this all day if I could. You want to think about what's the reason, what's the trigger, and what's the catalyst that's sort of prompted you or your team or your boss to say, we need to run a training session on that, or we need to run a learning session, or we need to run a collaboration session, whatever you might want to call it. So it's really helpful to give some insights into why you've bothered to assemble. So if you think about the intro to my session, I was talking to you about things that I've learned over a decade of being an in-house legal practitioner. I've talked to you about things that I learned while I worked with other people who are in-house legal practitioners, or things I've observed maybe from feedback that I've had from my colleagues. And so it really helps to extrapolate that. So it might be, over the past 10 years, well, maybe in your case, it might be over the past several months, the legal team has been receiving more queries about how to perform a contract review. And we've discovered it's not well known that we have a contract review team or a contract review service or a contract review submission form. So we've decided to help you out by learning how to run your contract reviews by showing how we can help you today. Nice and easy. And that will probably make you feel, as a recipient of that information, like, yeah, I'm that person too. Or, yeah, I'm the one that's been saying that. That's great. They've responded by creating this webinar almost just for me. Imagine the perception and feeling that creates in that person on the other end of the screen. It's all about building up not just your brand for brand's sake, but actually being genuine and authentic. You actually want people to know that you care about them, because that's one thing that we also have in common, and that I always experienced when I worked with people when I was with Islands, is actually we all want to help. That really is something that's prevailing across our profession. This is a great way to show people that you care. Okay, then we move into the next part, which is you tell people what they're going to learn today. They want to know. And if they're a latecomer, great, they're now catching up. So this is where the timing, we're planning and we're timing this. If you want to time a webinar that's going to last 45 minutes to an hour, now it might be 45 minutes of you talking with 15 minutes for Q&A, it might be at the end, or it might be scattered throughout. Or it might just be that realistically that you're going to plan it for an hour, but with all the faff time and all the tech issues and all the latecomers and all the bits and bobs, it's probably only going to be 45 minutes of chat time. So 3 learning points fits in really well, 45 minutes to an hour. If you've got 30 minutes only, just knock one off and do 2 learning points. If you've only got 15 minutes, or you only want to deliver 15-minute quick top tips, which is a super duper way of sharing kind of technology adoption information, short, sharp, one piece of info at a time, people will forget it otherwise, then just reduce your learning points down to 1. Easy. Can I just ask in the chat if anybody has been running webinars already in their organization, or seminars, whatever you might want to call it? Okay, we've got some yeses. Some people have been. That's fantastic. So Lisa's run some sessions on good decision making. Wonderful. Always one of our pain points is how people are making decisions and what they're thinking about. They've got any critical thinking skills? Excellent. Okay, so what you're going to talk to people about in the next slide is, or you might just talk to this, is what they'll achieve by the end of that session. You want to let them know that by the end of it, they'll have done X, or they've learned how to do Y. Then we move into an engaging question. You want to ask a prompt question about one of the learning outcomes. Why? You'll notice I've been asking you engaging questions all the way through. Why? Because I want to engage your audience. Oh, sorry, I want to engage the audience. I want to know you're there. I want to know you're listening. But also I want to build rapport. I want to know if this is it landing? Is this point landed? What's it created? Do you agree? Do you not agree? What's it made you think about? If you're in Teams, you don't have to do it the way we run it on Zoom, like this, where you are all kind of mute and I'd love you to be talking to me. You can just ask people to unmute. You can say to your colleagues, you can ask them a question, and then pause, and you'll notice what I do. Take a sip of water. Don't be afraid of the silence. Don't feel obliged to fill the silence. Your colleagues will be thinking of things, but they're not going to catch up as quickly as you. You're in full presenter mode. You're going fast. They're just letting it land and letting it sink in. They might think, oh, I do have a question. Just give them a couple of seconds. Ask the question, have it on screen, take a sip of water, and just let people have a chance to respond. Teresa's right. The silence is much shorter for the audience than it is for the presenter. Let's do a little test for that. I'm going to ask you how long you should wait. Pop it in the chat. How long should you pause when asking a question? Fabulous. I've just paused for 10 seconds. So some people have said 30, some people have said 5, some people have said 10. Yep, might depend on the question. About 10 to 15 is just about right. Actually, it doesn't matter. The point is just to pause. Don't start timing yourself with like your phone and your timer. You'll start to just get really frazzled. Time it takes to take a breath, take a sip, just wait. People will answer. And if they don't, because it's in-house, you typically know someone at the other end of the Teams chat anyway. And so you just say, oh, hey, Joe, what do you think about that? We did that bit of work last week on that. What did you think? They'll answer you. It's fine. These are your colleagues. They're your peers. They're not sort of this silent, faceless audience that you don't know. Okay, so engaging questions. So moving through this, we then have our learning point, and this is where you want to expand in far more detail about that learning point. So you want to link to the outcome that you've included in your invite email. Don't forget that you might have said to your colleagues, you're going to learn this. And then you completely go off on a tangent and they don't learn that at all. And you are so proud of yourself. You get to the end of the session, like, oh my God, I did such a good job. And then somebody comes and asks you for the answer to the question you said they were going to get in the invite. You're going to learn today how to lodge a legal request. And they go, oh, could you let me know how to lodge a legal request? And you're like, I've just told you that. And they're like, oh, actually you didn't. You just talked all about types of legal requests and how you help and what you do, but you didn't actually tell us how. So just remember to check that your slides actually answer the question. This is why this framework really helps. And I have to do that. I had to go back. I always have a panic before I do these sessions. And I go, have I actually covered the things I said I was going to cover? Because I might have written the webinar invite or the blurb for that like 6 months ago. Okay. Handy hints. I want you to think about using images, checklists, and photos when you're going into the learning point. Like this, I'm showing you a sort of page turn of the resource you're going to use. Be visual. Kinetic learning is very important. Some people will listen to your words. Some people will listen to the words plus look at the screen. Some people really won't focus on what you're saying at all, and they'll just look at the screen. Everyone has a different learning style. So just cater to all of those and make sure you're showing people what you mean. I'll give you some examples in a moment. Use checklists. Use photos that are engaging photos that people kind of might be inspired by or might, prompt them to think about something. Offer a solution. As you're going through, use the learning point to explain that what you're doing is going to give people the answer to the question or the solution to the problem that you know they've got, even if they didn't know it for themselves. And then go back to an engagement question. So how might that work? You might have taught somebody, here is the framework of how to run a great webinar. My engagement question might have been or was, who else runs webinars? And what did you do? And some people have told me what they ran webinars about. Katrina's created a Privacy 101 and conflict of interest webinar. Wicked. Some people have run team meetings to present to other teams on maybe a little bit more about what the legal team does, build up that rapport. Someone else has done one on privacy, very common. I did one on privacy last week. Some people have done on Get Smarts. So the point is you can ask that engaging question back to the point. You'll see that's repeated, so I don't need to kind of go through this. You're all clever. You can see now that that is just a rinse and repeat, okay? If you want to explain something that has some sort of metric or evidence, for example, we have rolled out this new technology and we've run some reports and it shows that we've only got a 15% uptake of this technology. People are still emailing us instead of using the portal that we've created. And 15% is a bit too low. So actually, we're going to try and help you with this webinar to understand why we don't need to email us directly, but use the portal, because we're going to try and get that up to 85%. Don't be afraid to share information and metrics. It really helps people to understand the importance of the information that you're sharing. Let's dive into some worked examples. But before we do, we're going to close out how you finish the webinar. The way you finish the webinar is you have a call to action. Now, this is language from marketing speak. A call to action in marketing space might be buy now, sign up for this newsletter, book a call. Yours might be very similar. Book a call, lodge a request, attend the next session, contact me, invite me to your team meeting. You've got a call to action. There's a reason you want people to listen to your training or your webinar. It's because you want them to do something, or you want them to achieve something as well as doing something at the end. So don't forget to tell them what you want them to do. They won't necessarily know. It's not intuitive to everybody. Some people really need you to be like very, very clear about the action you want them to take. So it might be, we would like you to use our online resources. Here's where you can access that link. We would like you to use this online portal. Here's the resource or the link to get to that on our intranet. We'd like you to get in touch with us when your project's kicking off. Here's the email address you can use to get in touch. If you need to know more about privacy, I'm one of the privacy officers. Please get in touch with me if you suspect any kind of data breach. Nice and simple. If you've got any active links, if you use OneDrive, if you're a Microsoft 365 business, if you use Google, very unlikely, but if you do, if you've got an intranet page, if you've got a matter management system, whatever it might be, if there's something live that you want to provide a link to, pop it in. If there's a document you want somebody to access, either attach it to the invite or attach a link to it, if that's the way you share. That all works in Teams really well. And then the engagement offer sounds, again, a little bit markety, but it's just about saying thank you. Thank you. Our offer is we want to engage more. So if you'd like to get in touch, this is how you can do it. You want to invite an opportunity for people to contact you again. And you want them to feel like this is not the first and only time they're ever going to hear from you. You want this to be like an ongoing relationship. So invite them, give them an engagement offer. Thanks so much. If you've got any suggestions, could you let me know? Would you like to hear more about this? Is there anyone else in your team that we need to run this training for? Would you like to get in touch? Would you like to organize us to come along to your next team meeting? This is your offer to engage more with your organization. Okay, so the show and tell bit. What do I mean by show and tell? I mean things that are visual, that direct people to see what you're talking about and what the key bits of information are that they want you to share with them. So for example, this is from one that I ran on lodging a legal request. I would show them. This is where you click. This is what you will see. This is where I want you to type in. And there's all sorts of tools online that you can use for this. I use one called, what's it called? Annotate. Awesome Screenshot is what I use. And it allows you to take a screenshot and then it allows you to add all these lovely arrows and circles. And it makes it look super duper professional, which I love. Also really good for learning tools. Very helpful. You want to make sure that you're taking people through the show and tell in a paced way. So even if you've got them all on the screen like this, give them a chance to take it in. So walk them through it. Here, you would, here, for example, you would type in the text here. This is the type of text you might type in. If you want to add an attachment, click here. It'll either ask you to link it from OneDrive or you can upload it from your local drive. That means your desktop or your downloads. And just attach it like you would to a normal email. If you use our document management system and there's a code, just pop it in here. We'll find it. Katrina, the name of the software is called, this is Katrina from, I think from Free Range, Awesome Screenshot and Screen Recorder. I'll pop a link in for Brianna to attach with all my kind of handy software suggestions. How's that? Okay. If you want to show people what your guidance resources are, show them. Show them on the screen. Often we talk about things in sort of theory or concept, and we know all about it. We're very close to it. We've designed the resources perhaps, or we've created them, or we've helped upload them. Other people have never seen that before. So show them what you mean. So for example, you might be somebody that has some infographics. You might say, we've got some infographics online. Here's how you find them. This is what it's going to look like. This is our legal guideline. You'll see a lot of these on our internet page. Feel free to browse. There'll be something there that will help answer your question. Here's your checklist that you need to go through. This is what we're going to walk through today. So show people on screen what it is you want them to learn or to use, or how they can use that in the future. What you want to do while you're doing this is coach as you go. I asked Kath to give me this testimonial, and she was happy to have her name featured here. And she said, actually, it's really helpful that when you do these sessions, you use a coaching approach. You tell us what we need, you give us the tools, and we can do our roles better. So think of these webinars or sessions as an opportunity to coach as you go. You're building competency, you're upskilling, you're showcasing your knowledge, you're getting information out of your brain into theirs, and you're helping them, not just telling them. Really important to feel that you're a coach, because we've got large organizations. And of course, what we want to try and do is get a little bit of our brain power released so that it can be used for, one to many. So we need our colleagues to try and learn from us and kind of implement that learning. So be patient. That's why the 1 to 3 learning points is really important. Don't try and stuff every single thing about the Privacy Act into one session. They're not going to remember past probably 1 or 2 points. People's attention span is very short, very, very short. And we're overwhelmed and overloaded, and that, prefrontal cortex gets a bit crowded and a bit congested. So take your time, coach as you go. They'll love you for it. So how do you invite colleagues? We've got 5 minutes left of this session. That's deliberate. We're going to go through now how you invite your colleagues to want to attend your sessions. What you want to do is train them to attend by giving them information about the tips they're going to get. You want them to know that they're going to learn some stuff, and they're going to feel like that stuff is important or helpful. So you want to use nice sort of comforting language. You want to invite them. You've got a framework here of how you can invite people to attend your sessions. The copy of this is inside that resource that you can download. It's on the 2nd tab. So don't worry if you sort of trying to take a screenshot of this furiously. It's okay. It's in there. Invite them. Make sure you include the definitions inside the document. Now, what I mean by that is, if you've started to use consistent definitions like Learn with Legal or Train with Tips, whatever it might be, if you've sort of used like a sort of certain way to name your sessions, whatever you defined your sessions as, then make sure you're just repeating that throughout. So that might be inside the slide or invitation header. It will be inside the invite, and it will be inside the actual calendar as well. So it's consistent. Oh, this is one of those Learn with Legal sessions. At Tuatahi First Fibre, I called them a Wednesday webinar. So everything would say Wednesday webinar, Wednesday webinar, Wednesday webinar. Be consistent. And then you walk them through what you want them to do. You want them to learn with you. What are they going to learn? Use checklists or nice ticks. Why should they attend? You should attend this session on creating a compliant form if you manage or create forms for surveys, permit requests, online payments. By the end of this session, you'll know X. I look forward to seeing you there. No hora mai. You're inviting. They want to come along. They're like, oh God, she knows what we do. This is great. I totally am going to turn up to her session. Oops. There's more examples of this inside your download handout. This one is for the version we used for Queenstown Lakes District Council, which is Learn with Legal. There's also the Wednesday webinar version inside your handout. Anyone got any questions on that before we move into the types of topics you can run sessions on? Okay, let's check the chat. All good. So what kind of topics can you run webinars or training sessions on? Well, actually, the options are completely endless. You all work in such varying organizations that it's really going to be targeted to what your organization's needs are. But here's some samples of what we've done in the past in the organizations I've worked with. Our Wednesday webinars, we did things like an inside track. Sorry, this is a little bit blurred. We did, for example, how to take a tour inside a contract review. We started to roll out contract. We did a self-review form and we got people to learn how to review their own contracts. We just didn't have time. So we would help them to take an inside track tour. We had one during COVID, how to organise remote signing during level 3. Very topical, very specific to that particular moment in time. We talked about how to create an NDA that was actually compliant, that actually did what it needed to do. At Queenstown Lake District Council, the 2 examples I've worked with here is we talked people through how to lodge a legal request, how to create a compliant form. This list is endless. So how does this help? Thanks, Dave. How does this help? Well, it covers those 3 common issues to all in-house legal teams. Webinars that are clear and consistent and build your brand allow people to understand what you do and how it helps them. It allows you to roll out tech if you need that to be adopted and you've got a whole training regimen to roll out. Short, sharp 15 minutes or small targeted 30-minute chunks are best. It shows people who you are, you people who care, you people who have extremely valuable knowledge bases, and also who they can contact. It does all those 3 things, and you've now got a framework on how to run those sessions seamlessly and with ease. So thank you very much. We've finished at 1 o'clock. We are bang on time. And if you want to get in touch with me, I'm on LinkedIn. I'd love to hear from you. And I really, really hope that has helped you all today.